side. The NXT2 controller, it's a multi-valve controller. It is the successor to the NXT, and there are a host of reasons for that. But we're going to go over an overview of the product, features, benefits, certifications, the icons, the display, circuit board, and the literature and the ever-present questions. So essentially the NXT controller has essentially reached obsolescence from a circuit board manufacturing standpoint. So our supplier will no longer be making the NXT and XT circuitry. And these were circuits that were used in a plethora of other devices besides our controllers. So with understanding that, we needed to develop NXT2 to replace the NXT. So going forward, there will be no replacements of the NXT controller. It has to be upgraded directly to the NXT2. So this is truly a commercial controller. It is designed to function with all of our commercial valves from the 1-inch 2510 all the way up through the 3-inch 3900, and it's really designed around maximizing the functionality and complexity of commercial installations using a networked controller. Now, it has on screen a multilingual support, English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Dutch or Netherlands, and Portuguese. So it is definitely a controller that can go anywhere in the world or into any language environment domestically if required. It has a 2 to 4 line scrolling text OLE display, high contrast, easy to read, low light conditions and at a distance. This is the real deal. You can actually read this from across the room in a dark basement or dimly lit equipment room. So it fits right in with our tech's lives, rather than the challenging display on the NXT where you had to be right in front of the unit to read. Full functional user interface. So the big thing about this is forward and backwards menu navigation. No more skipping a menu item and then having to go all the way around the menu again to get back. You can go right back. And the controller is capacitive touch. No more button smashing. Just a light touch of your finger navigates you through the menu. We can network 2 to 8 valves depending on system with Cat5 cabling or better based on the system type that you select. We have 2 regeneration lockout windows. So if you're dealing with commercial process water where they can't afford a pressure drop during a specific part of their day. We like to cite dairies as an example. During the milking process, they can't have that pressure drop due to regeneration, so we're able to lock out regeneration for that period of time, wait till they're done using that water, and then regenerate the softener. You have 2 programmable auxiliary relay outputs, and this is for controlling anything from just about anything you want under the sun during a regeneration or lockout. You can turn on and off a chemical pump. You can turn it on and off a pump for an RO system. You can turn on a signal light if you need to let people know that you're regenerating the softener. All sorts of functionality here that you can get out of those programmable relays.
So,
Oh, still good. Just had some excessively loud puppy dogs in the backyard.
gotcha.
Didn't want them making the recording. So there's some features and benefits that we've added to the system. You can add the assistant's name and phone number of the service provider that can enter this on each one of the valves. So if there's an error code display, this name will come up along with the error code. They'll cycle back and forth between those two screens. Dynamic network addressing. This means you no longer have to skid these 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row up to 8. You can put these in any order, and the NXT will assign the valves the proper address and sequence of events without having to have them in a specific numbered order. So this frees up the installer to design around the space constraints rather than working with a strict skidded sort of rectangular box to fit into a location. Also, it has the ability to push programming. So if you enable the push function on all the valves you want to network, you program one valve and it'll push that programming through the rest of the valves, saving significant time in programming and gives you a very consistent system from start to finish, with eliminating the potential multiple entry errors on multiple valves. You can reset to factory default settings, or from a saved custom settings menu that you set your program for that valve and that number of valves as your custom setting, and you can save it to that so it can be brought right back up during a power outage after it's being saved. The diagnostics, we add on to the real-time flow rate, peak flow rate, totalizer, reserve capacity, volume used since last regeneration, and hours since last regeneration, to add a total number of regenerations, the regeneration interval, how often is it regenerating X number of days, X number of hours. My favorite is last settings change. So when you set up the valve, the next time the settings are changed, it logs that date and time. So you know if your customers have been playing with the settings on the valve, and that way you can solve those sorts of disputes, whether it is valve or someone's been playing with something. Error log history, it keeps a track of those errors so that you have a reference to what's going on site. And daily and average use for a quarter, 13 weeks. So it allows you to see if you need to adjust your programming at all based on their water use, and an identifiable software version. So the systems are all the same as the NXT, except we've added one. System 8. System 4 is a single valve. System 5 is parallel interlock valve, so it's parallel flow, basically one large softener. That's where System 5 is going to be. They all regenerate at the same time. They all come into service at the same time. Now, System 6 is parallel series regeneration, which is one large softener, but they regenerate staggered to meet a lower flow demand as it progresses through the regenerations. System 7 is for 2 valves, and this is your standard alternating system where you have one tank in standby and it switches between the two when you need water, giving you consistent soft water 24 hours a day. System 8 is System 7, but with a delayed regeneration with one valve in standby. What this means, it's going to switch tanks, provide soft water, but it's going to delay regenerating that first exhausted softener until a point in the day where pressure drop won't affect the operation. So this one's geared towards those process plants with that need lockout windows for specific regeneration times. You can set this up ahead of time, program when you want it to regenerate if it hits this situation. Now, System 9 is 2 to 8 valves, alternate, immediate with 1 valve in standby. So it's always going to have 1 valve in standby, and it's going to alternate between the tanks, turning them on and off to provide soft water and then regenerating. And then System 14 is demand recall. This is 2 to 8 valves. And what this will do is it'll bring on additional tanks into service as water demand picks up. It has a settable turn on at a specific flow rate for each tank to go on. So let's say you had a demand range between 50 and 300 GPM, and you've got 3 2900s in a row. You can set the second tank to come on at, like, let's say 75 to 80 gallons per minute. It'll turn on, be ready to go for when you bring on that other line at 100 gallons per minute. And up to 200 gallons per minute, you'll bring on that third tank on at 275 GPM, so it's ready to go to pick up that extra flow. And then you'll step it down likewise backwards. Each has an individual meter tracking how much water it uses, and it'll regenerate as needed. So that's a very useful function when dealing with processed water that has multiple lines of service. We use this system at our Hanover Park plant making our Everpure filters. We have a triplex system where as each individual can washing line kicks into service, those softeners ramp up just prior to that demand, giving us soft water managed throughout the entire cycle. So on to the certifications. It's UL 979 listed in Canada and the United States. It's RoHS compliant, which means you can ship this controller to Europe if you have an order there or not, along with any system designed with this controller. Now, this is the different icons for the displays. You have the flowing faucet as in service, the Z's for standby, a flashing water drop for flow, the circular diamond of arrows is regeneration. A solid diamond is the master unit. It's auto-assigned by the unit. Here is your network indicator. It means that that valve is connected. With an X through it means that valve is disconnected. And a network indicator unit missing. That means either there's something wrong with the physical wire itself, or that unit is lost power or something along those lines. It's not sensing a unit in connected into its proper location. Then you have the exclamation point in a circle as your error signal, and remote lock on the unit. You have the lock window. Initializing means this is starting up. You have upper and lower drive movement. And the nice thing about this controller is it will eliminate choices from the menu depending on the valve you select. So you only get 2-piston functionality and programming with 2-piston valves. With a single piston valve, you only see the single piston options. You have a remote regeneration queued. Master programming is the pencil. User programming is something the user can get into and change hardness, but not much else. The diagnostic menu and the time of day programming. So here's the display. This is just about with everything on it. The key things are blue LED means the unit in service. If it's blinking, Blue, it's going into regeneration. It's been queued or lined up depending on the system. A green LED is the unit is in regeneration, and blinking, the unit is in standby waiting to regenerate. And if you've got a red light, you have an error present. Now, the left button is just navigating left or left backwards through the menu. If you press and hold the left menu, you'll enter into the diagnostic menu. Now, the down button, this just sets values up and down, but if you press and hold the down arrow, you'll get time of day. Same thing with either up and down arrow. If you press and hold either one of those buttons, you'll get the time of day menu. If you press the left button and the down button, you'll enter master programming. If you press the down button and the up button, you'll enter user programming. So we want to make sure we let the users into the user programming, but not the master programming. The extra cycle button is navigate an arrow button, but you press and hold, I believe it's up to 5 seconds for a regeneration to be queued in that tank. And then the programming will take over from there as well. This is the actual display in a dark room. So you can see it's well lit and very readable, full written choices, what type of system, volume remaining, very simple to read. And when in service, it'll scroll between the date, volume remaining, and current flow rate. This is the scrolling display when you're going to select a system. The one that it's on will scroll, fully spelled out which unit it is, and allow you to select that. No more remembering abbreviations. Here, it'll be much more simplified for the technician, less for them to remember. Now, the circuit board, you have your two Cat5 connectors here. You have your lower drive wiring, your lower drive motor power. So this is for the lower motor. You have the drive harness for the valve here for single piston valves. You have the power supply. It comes in at the bottom. Please note there is a 2-pin connector here that is a lot smaller than this one. But technicians can cram this connection onto here and it will burn out that board. That little puff of smoke, you can't get back in once it happens. So we want to make sure they're using the appropriate power up location down here. It's right next to the other harness. They kind of go together. The auxiliary relays here, these are dry contacts. These we prefer to see these low voltage. They will take line voltage. I would not apply 220 volts to this little circuit card. Well, A, it's going to be very difficult to get a 220 volt gauge wire in to these connectors, but it can take line voltage at 115. Most of the time, it's low voltage circuits, 24 volt to 12 volt control circuits. You have your meter cable where you plug this in for your digital meter. You have your remote start and remote lock connection. And you have your USB field programmer connection right here. If you're doing lots of these with stock programs, you can plug in a laptop, plug it directly into the board and push a program directly into the board for programming. If you have saved field programs, it's convenient for that if you get a lot of these in the field. Now, to compare the two, this is the difference between the two. Before, you got this big, clumsy, clunky box that bolted onto the system. The NXT2 will now nest into any one of our controller nests going forward, so that they're interchangeable with SXT, XTR2, and the NXT2 all cradle into the same holders. You have an increase up to 8 valves versus the 4 prior. Why? Well, our competitor does 6, so we might as well add a little more capability up to 8. There is a lot of water flow that's available there to you for even some rather large applications. Even small municipalities could be done with 8 3900 valves. You have System 8, immediate transfer delayed regeneration that's available. Dynamic addressing. Before, you had to program each valve address. This is automatically done for the technician once you assign master and the push functions. Push settings, you had to program each controller before. Now program one controller and push the programming to the remaining ones just by enabling that feature. Backwards and forwards navigation, which is a big thing for a technician. I know I've spent my afternoons frustrated pushing buttons and skipping windows. That gets rather frustrating in a hurry. You have 2 programmable lockout windows where you did not have them before, and you can enter in your dealer's name and number as well to the NXT2 where you couldn't before. We've gone from one normally open contact to a normally open and a normally closed contact for whatever functionality a dealer may desire. You have a tight totalizer with daily and average water usage versus just a totalizer. So good customer information and water use and business information for them as well. Now comes the parts for the quiz. Here are the part numbers. This is a straight replacement board. As you can see, it just clips into a nest. Here's the nest. There is only one difference between all the different controllers. For the 2815 valve, we have a bracket which stands it off so it meets the cover better in that application. But as you can see, all our controllers going forward will be nested into a cradle like this. You have conversion kits between all the major markets in the world, between Europe, Australia, and Japan, and the US. So you have options there. Now, this is something that's going to be critical. Just took a phone call on this today. If you are going to upgrade an NXT controller in the field, we need to know what year that system was installed in or manufactured in. If it came out prior to 2008, you will need to change the motor as well as the controller to upgrade the NXT2. This will cause a great deal of confusion for the controller because it's sending out a DC signal to an AC motor, and it does not communicate well. So if it's later than 2008, it's a 24-volt AC-DC rectified motor with a little card on the back. That's how you can tell. If it is before 2008, you're going to have this AC wound motor, and the NXT2 will not work with it. So when you get an order for a replacement, make sure you ask what date it was installed. If it's 2008 or earlier, you're going to need to replace this motor as well. Now, here's the eye chart. This is the part numbers for the NXT2 controller paired with all of these different softeners and filters. We have a full line of literature available, also via the Pentair catalog and Partner Center. So field technicians can have access to this and the troubleshooting guide and service manuals and the spec sheet as well.